what we found that in the United States, in some jurisdictions and locales, because of the popularity of the term paternity fraud, a lot more men and boys know that on their very first round with the court, they absolutely need to insist on a paternity test in writing and not accept anything else less than that, and absolutely refuse to sign a document that agrees with them being the father until they have test results in their hand confirming this child is related to him. Public awareness has helped men and boys in this respect to not be taken advantage of.
For sure. That's a good segue actually into the book. So you wrote a book. It's a pretty quick, easy read called Trapped by Law. But what you just mentioned was one of the 4 traps that men need to avoid in order to prevent becoming a victim of paternity fraud. So the first one you mentioned in your book was do not sign a voluntary acknowledgement of paternity if you are not sure. Can you tell the audience what is a voluntary acknowledgement of paternity?
Sure. I liken it to this. How many people, if you were told, I want you to sign a confession that you did something with no proof, and if you sign this document, it will obligate you for 18 to 21 years of increasing financial responsibility. And then if you discover later that it wasn't true, I'm going to tell you it's your fault. Now here's my pen. Would you sign admitting that you did it before you had proof? When I've asked men and boys this question, you know what their answer was? Absolutely not. So using that approach, I said, well, then you got to look at a paternity acknowledgement the same way. In the United States, there is this process where the attempt is to get more men and boys signed up initially, where you can now execute legal action against him to collect child support and maintenance. And he has no rights to see the child. But because if he signs this document saying, I acknowledge that I am the father of this child. Now, I remind you, who was his only source of information that A, that the pregnancy existed, and B, that he is allegedly the child's father? He does not arrive to that conclusion on his own in a bubble. Okay? So it goes by a couple of touchy-feely names like voluntary acknowledgement, the paternity papa program. And the technique is used almost to emotionally disarm the guy or man, is to get him to hold the baby while you stroke his heart and his ego and tell him how much the baby looks like him. Oh, look, that baby's got your eyes. Look, he's got your nose. Man, he's got dimples like you. Sign here. At that point, Warren, that man or boy doesn't have enough information to make an 18 to 21 legal decision and then be bound to that decision, because at that moment he is emotionally disarmed. So the best approach for him is trust but verify. I hear what you're saying. You say I did it. Okay, I hear you. I'm going to need verification that I did it. And the most accurate form of verification is a DNA test. And some of them are going to discover that verbal assurance is not true.
Trust but verify. That's a really good motto to adopt. The second one that you mentioned in your book was incorrect default judgment. So this has a bit of a legalese vocabulary to it. Can you explain what that means?
Sure. So in the confines of the United States, a judge or a hearing officer can declare a man or boy as the father of a child just using this writing instrument or one like it. You see it in the screen here. This is all it takes is to make you the father of a child because you didn't come to the hearing. Victims, a target group of victims for this area are military men who are either deployed or at a duty station to where they can't just pick up and leave and decide to go to a court several hundred miles away without getting approval from their commanding officers that they can leave. So regardless of the reason the guy doesn't make it to the court, if he's not physically present or has a legal representative representing him and bringing to the court his demand for genetic verification that the child is his, he loses. And the reason I say it is an incorrect default judgment, because the court doesn't require any proof from the child's mother when she submits a lawsuit. I'll say that again. In the United States and U.S. territories and many other countries, the child's mother is not required to submit proof that the guy is the child's father when she files a lawsuit seeking child maintenance and child support. And within that little area right there, the environment is ripe for fraud, because she doesn't have to tell him that there's multiple people that could be the dad. She's not required to present to the court there's multiple people that could be the dad. And the most egregious case that I know of that's actually on YouTube, the child's mother knew the guy wasn't the dad and put down the wrong address for the guy. So the guy doesn't even know about the court hearing because he was not properly served. And in the United States, we have this thing called due process, where you are entitled to know about the lawsuit so that you could adequately defend yourself with sufficient time to acquire help if you need to be able to defend yourself against this lawsuit. Well, that just furthers my belief it is a legal trap.
It is a trap, and the second one is kind of a trap by omission, but it's men who fail to do something in the right way by a certain time, whereas the first one, voluntary acknowledgement of paternity, is by commission. So men need to be aware that they can be trapped into a unfavorable situation by what they do and by what they don't do. So they have to be proactive and plan ahead. And you actually pointed out something in there just as a side note, which is that the standards for evidence and the processes in family court are very different from criminal court.
Absolutely.
As we all know, like there's so many criminal drama shows on television now. There are standards for evidence, and there's a presumption of innocence. There's a process you have to follow, and then at the end you have a verdict, guilty, not guilty. There's a consequence. But in family court, the mother who's claiming child support from a man doesn't have to prove objectively, scientifically that he's the father. It's just her words are taken as given, as truth.
Yes. Presumed
so
guilty.
That's a pretty weak standard.
Yeah, you're presumed guilty because she said so. This is a horrible standard.
That's something that if you tried to use that as evidence, my neighbor killed that person, it wasn't me. Exactly. If you just said that would be inadmissible evidence in criminal court. But in family court, it seems to work.
Exactly.
There's a third one, which you said is marital presumption of paternity. Yes. So this, I assume it means that if a man is still legally married to a woman, any children that woman gives birth to during that period of being married are presumed to be belonging to that man, even though it could have been someone else.
Look, any children she has until she's divorced from him, and then within 360 days of the divorce, if she has a kid, he's still automatically assumed. And now that the history on that marital presumption, you can trace it to Old English common law. The term, you can look it up, is called the Lord Mansfield Doctrine. And typically back in the 1600s, the man was automatically presumed, unless, by the way, there were some exceptions, unless he was away on the high seas. Meaning, what was the mode of transportation back then? What, horseback, carriage, ship? Well, if he was off away on a ship at her time of conception and her delivery, and she had a baby by the time he got back home, well, that guy had an alibi. He had a verifiable alibi that he could not have done it. But there were other exceptions. If he had some equipment malfunctions and he was unable to perform the role necessary for her to get pregnant, well, that also would give him an exclusion. Also would give her grounds for divorce too in some of those areas. But one other thing that was major about the Old English common law. In the Old English common law, the man would never be a paternity fraud victim. And here's why. The woman and the children actually belong to him as chattel. So I'm not advocating that we go back under Old English common law, but I will make note that the man couldn't be a paternity fraud victim because once he discovered the child was not his, there was no judge could forcibly take his resources and throw him out of his house. But with no fault divorce laws, this is the other flip side of why the marital presumption is so dangerous for men specifically, is your wife can go cheat on you, have multiple affairs, get pregnant from the affairs, and then use a no-fault divorce law to divorce you, sue you for alimony, sue you for child support and maintenance, and sue you for the house and stick you with a legal bill. Now, how is that fair and equitable to men? It's not.
It's not, plain and simple. Exactly. Well said. There was a fourth one, which I believe is the most minor trap, which is simply mistaken identity. So in some cases, the man who's being asked to pay has the same name as somebody else, and it was just a mix-up.
Well, I actually have a case, multiple cases that I've actually seen. I've seen a case where a kid was roughly 14 years old being demanded to pay child support on a 17-year-old. The kid had the exact same name as the guy's name on the child support order. And in spite of this young man's mother advocating on his behalf that you guys got the wrong person, she showed them her son's birth certificate. Her son's birth certificate clearly shows he wasn't on the planet when the child on the child support order was born. The Child Support Enforcement Agency would not drop the case until the mother did something they didn't expect. The mother went and told the story to the news crews, and she put it on statewide news how dumb and asinine the Child Support Agency was so determined to make her 14-year-old son pay child support. I was like, wait a minute, come on, guys, you should have some level of proof about who you have on your order. Have a photo, have a fingerprint. Well, guess what? If they had a genetic report, they could actually confirm who that person was at a minimum, but a photograph of the guy you got on the child support order so that you don't mistakenly pursue another party. It is not rare in the United States this happens, Warren. I met a cameraman for the Tyler Perry studios, and this gentleman happened to have the same name as a guy who had a child support enforcement order on him. Based on the physical description of the arrest warrant, my client was shorter by about 5 inches, heavier by about 30 pounds, and different complexion skin-wise. And the other guy was taller, about 6'1", skinnier, like 150 pounds, and the other guy had tattoos, and he was as darkly complexioned as me, if not more. You could read the warrant and look at my client and say, nope, that's not him. Instead, the police put him in jail for 4 days. He was a victim of mistaken identity, false arrest, false imprisonment, and no one would drop the case until I was able to find an attorney willing to help. And we had requested that the court order the mother to appear before the court and identify who her child's father was. The child's mother said immediately, that's not him.
Yeah, when you hear cases like that, it's just ridiculous. Like, there's some obvious ones where it's clearly not the person, but it seems to me when I read, the various research reports, Wikipedia, journalistic pieces on this issue, is the law is very strong in ensuring fathers or men's responsibilities to take care of children. It's very weak in giving them any kind of rights to counterbalance those responsibilities. And to me, this is what a just society is all
Mm-hmm.
about. It's a balance for every single person, man, woman, child, whoever, between rights and responsibilities, so that everyone is treated fairly. And right
Yes.
now, it post separation, when the relationship ends, if a father wants to continue to see his child, that is his real biological child, it's often
Mm-hmm.
very difficult because of the way that family courts allocate custody
Yes.
towards in
Yes.
favor of the mother. And yet, at the same time, when he finds out that it is not his child and he wants
Mm-hmm.
to be released from the financial obligations, it's also very difficult for him to be released from that because the state has an interest in ensuring that children have access to resources. It really, really doesn't want children to be left destitute and living in poverty or deprivation,
Mm-hmm.
regardless of
Mm-hmm.
whether it's the right man they're claiming those resources from or not. And
Yes.
to me, that's an imbalance that we need to rectify.
Easily so. Easily so. But what you just hit upon is, what sort of message does this send to men? That we are only valued as an ATM, meaning auto cash tomorrow. If we don't provide financial resources, then the child's right to having frequent, consistent contact with their father and their paternal family is treated as of no value. The guy could have been married to the mother, the guy could have been cohabitating with the mother, and as soon as they have two different addresses, most of the child maintenance formulas and child support formulas are geared in such a way that if you minimize the contact with the child's father, you can set the child support and child maintenance payment to its highest level, irregardless of whether it leaves the father with the ability for self support and self care. You can drive a father into such poverty that he doesn't have a place to live to be able to bring the child to, and that's assuming the child's mother doesn't interfere with his court ordered parenting time. The number one complaint I hear from men for the past 3 decades is the court will not enforce their parenting time with the same weight and emphasis as they will do on a guy who's 31 days late on payments. In the United States, you are subject to lose, in addition to your freedom, you lose your financial resources, banking, checking, savings seized, driver's license suspended. And some of the craziest answers that I've heard is that they tell the guy, we will let you get your license back that you need to go to work with and you need to drive the company's vehicle with. You'll get your license back when you pay the arrears and the money that you owe. And I've asked this question before legislators. If the guy has a job and what you're doing is going to cause him to lose the job, how is it fair then to put him in jail for a problem that you caused him?
Yeah.
Why not revisit the humanity side of the way the payments are working, and also children who have frequent, constant, and consistent contact with their father, he has an added motive and emphasis to do things for his child, provided he's allowed to have a relationship with the child.